Warning, the following video contains depictions of graphic violence. Viewer discretion is advised. It's very funny to me that Street Fighter, the most iconic fighting game series of all time, the grandfather of competitive fighters, the Kleenex or Band-Aid of the genre, has regional naming differences with some of their iconic Street Fighter 2 cast. See, over here stateside, we know these characters as Balrog, Vega, and M. Bison. That's not their true names, however. In the original Japanese release, their names are actually swapped around like so. Interesting. I wonder what could have caused this to happen. Yeah, so M. Bison over here is a hardly veiled reference to heavyweight boxing superstar and video game icon Mike Tyson. Taking the game outside of Japan proved to be an issue in this regard, especially since going forward, Boxer would be designed to have a more cartoony and exaggerated look instead of his realistic and possibly more lawsuit-enabling one in the original game. However, this is no isolated case within the genre. Many on a fighting game roster are direct references or take heavy inspiration from established humans or characters. I'm not even talking about the dime a dozen Bruce Lee characters you can just grab by the bushel at your local dollar store. Hell, we have multiple more to count just from the Street Fighter series. Dictator's original character portrait is scanned directly from the Riki-Oh manga. Guile and his military code-breaking hairstyle come from the JoJo's battle tendency, General Stroheim. And Rose is ripped straight from the pages of Battle Tendency as well, being an almost actionable copy of Lisa Lisa. Not everything is as apparent as Enter the Dragon and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. So let's take a look at some other fighting game characters who take heavy influence from more obscure sources. Unless you're a pro wrestling fan, in which case, let's talk about how cool Puroresu is. The year is roughly 1997. I am at my friend's house after school, watching in awe as he shows me this PlayStation 1 demo disc. There were some games on there I still remember, namely that one Battle Box game, Blast Chamber, but what stuck out beyond anything else for the both of us was Tekken 2. Tekken 2 fucking rules. Looking back through time, Tekken 2 felt like the first real Tekken game to me. Tekken 1 has this very awkward look to it, almost still trailing in the steps of Virtua Fighter. But Tekken 2 is where the series looked the way Tekken truly looks. Sure, the cast of characters was cool, but above all else stood one fighting game character, one design, made to capture the heart and awe of any cold-blooded 7-year-old boy. King. A pro wrestler with a jaguar's head. Who even thinks of that, I mused. It's the type of design ripped straight from the doodles of a child's notebook, alongside dinosaurs and ninjas and robots. It was almost too perfectly crafted of an idea. For years onward, well into my adolescence and young adult life, I adored the design of King. Not just the fashions they put him in, but just the idea that someone walked into the studio one day to present their draft. A wrestler in not just a luchador mask, but an entire taxidermied head of a jaguar, and it got through into the game. What brilliance in creative decision making, what freedom to pitch whatever off-the-wall designs came to mind. I was floored that someone could come up with such an idea and see it travel through into one of the most iconic characters in the series. And then one day I saw him sing Elvis.
But I can't help falling in love with you.
King being a direct reference to Tiger Mask has to be first on the list today because it stretches the idea of obscure. Today this is pretty well known, but shit, back in the 90s and 2000s there was no way I would have figured out about Tiger Mask. He's not even a real person, he's a real 8 people. But what I mean is that Tiger Mask is actually a character from his own manga. Tiger Mask, written by Iki Kajiwara and illustrated by Naoki Tsuji, follows a top-heel pro wrestler in America who comes back to Japan to be a babyface and fight against the mysterious organization of villains called Tiger's Den. While this only ran from 1968 to 1971, an animated series started in 1969 as well with 105 episodes. New Japan Pro Wrestling decided to license the character in the early 80s and make him a real-life wrestler. I don't have the cultural touch to know if King was made due to the popularity of the manga, the anime, the wrestler, or a combination of all three, but it wouldn't shock me if it was due to Tiger Mask 1. Originally donned by Satoru Sayama, Sayama was pretty good at this whole pro wrestling thing. How good do you ask? Sayama and Dynamite Kid's 1983 bout at Sumo Hall was rated as a 5-star match by iconic wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer. Sayama would go on to form the proto-mixed martial arts organization Shuto in 1985, a pioneering force in the burgeoning era of MMA. Shuto predated other iconic Japanese proto-MMA organizations such as Pancrase, and was an influence on the eventual landmark Japanese MMA organization Pride FC, something we will be absolutely talking about later. What I'm trying to say is that this Satoru Sayama guy is pretty fucking important to combat sports history. 7 other men have donned the Tiger Mask, including a young Mitsuhara Mitsuha, a man who would go on to define 90s All Japan Pro Wrestling and become one of the 4 Pillars of Heaven. Ikushia Minowa, aka Minowa Man, the Giant Killer, an MMA fighter who built a legacy on winning freak show fights against opponents who drastically outsized him. Go watch the Napoleon Blown Apart video about freak show fights. It has this fucking awesome section about Minowa Man. And Kota Ibushi, a New Japan Pro Wrestling star who has a freak physique and refuses to age. He took the role of Tiger Mask to cross-promote the 2016 Tiger Mask W anime, seeing him team up with Tiger Mask 4, the longest tenured Tiger Mask, to take on Kazuchika Okada and Gedo. And to tie this all around, King has gone on to reference modern wrestlers as well. Specifically, in Tekken 7, you can bling him out in the aforementioned Kazuchika Okada's gear and turn his super into Okada's iconic finishing move, the Rainmaker. Back into pro wrestling we go as we look at SNK's Raiden. SNK is a company with a very funny problem. They are simply too good at making fighting game characters. You could make multiple rosters of insanely cool characters from all the characters SNK has forgotten over the years. This company is physically unable to miss. But some characters from their early days still pop back up. Today's case is Raiden, a masked heavyweight wrestler from the original Fatal Fury that has stayed somewhat relevant thanks to appearing in Capcom vs SNK 2 and King of Fighters 13, 2 classic fighting games that have retained a legacy past their initial release. This one may be stretching the use of obscure even more than Tiger Mask, as Raiden is so obviously a take on legendary pro wrestler Big Van Vader. Wearing his original mask, sharing his lightning bolt motif, and most importantly, looking less like a human and more like a washer and dryer unit stacked on top of one another. Unlike Tiger Mask, Vader had a successful career wrestling stateside, working for WCW and WWE in the 90s on both broadcast television and pay-per-view events.
Stinger! February 21st, Super Brawl. The game becomes reality, and the party has only just begun. Stinger! Can you feel the leather around your neck? Can you feel it around your back? Stinger, you came to the White Castle of Fear, and I'm proud of you, brother, but that was the beginning of the end for Sting!
Vader in the 90s is pretty good. He was rarely a main eventer or anything during his time, but it wouldn't shock me if a non-wrestling fan had seen him before. But to be frank, Vader's 90s run is not why people would make a video game character out of him. Vader is an all-time Hall of Fame wrestler, routinely considered one of the greatest big men wrestlers to ever lace up a pair of boots, and if you only knew him from his time in the States, you would never be able to get a full grasp of just how cool Vader is. Vader, in Japan, is the stuff of legends. This dude has a laundry list of reasons why he's a certified fucking badass. So let me pull out the scrolls and wax poetic. Despite being a fucking refrigerator with arms and legs, Vader was able to hit a top rope moonsault. Even more impressive, he somehow killed 0 humans doing this. In 1990, Vader faced another Hall of Fame certified bad motherfucker wrestler, Stan Hansen. Hansen is a pro wrestler known for being stiffer than a brick, but not because he's a bad worker, instead because he had dog shit eyesight, and so in an effort to make sure that his moves look good, he just fucking walloped people. So before the match even started, Hansen accidentally breaks Vader's nose with his bullwhip. Wow, that sucks, you say, but it's only going to get worse for Vader, as during the brawl, Hansen accidentally thumbs Vader's eyeball right out of its socket. Always the professional, Vader popped that sucker back in and finished the match. Sure, he needed a metal plate in his face and suffered some vision damage, but he's been a pretty good sport about it ever since. Vader was the first ever Gaijin, or foreigner, to win the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. This belt was the Star Championship of New Japan Pro Wrestling from 1987 to 2021, and of the 31 wrestlers who have held it, only 8 were Gaijin. Vader would walk to the ring with a gigantic black mastodon headpiece. Obviously, this is tight as shit, but as far as I can tell from hearing it over the years and from what I can research, Vader's design and headpiece were created by Go Nagai, one of the most legendary manga artists in history, responsible for Devilmon, Cutie Honey, Mazinger Z, Violence Jack, and Jushin Thunder Liger. In my eyes, Go Nagai designing for wrestling is to Japan what iconic hardcore punk musician Bob Mould writing for WCW is to America. It's badass. When Vader debuted in New Japan, his first match was against Antonio Inoki. It's hard to properly state how important of a figure Inoki is. If you could combine Hulk Hogan, Floyd Mayweather, Joe Montana, and Michael Jordan, you could maybe come close to how influential Inoki is to Japanese sports. Not only is he one of the most famous Japanese wrestlers to ever live, but he founded New Japan Pro Wrestling, had a very weird but box office breaking match with Muhammad Ali, which kinda sorta invented wide-scale mixed martial arts, did 2 of the largest wrestling shows in history thanks to booking a doubleheader in North Korea where attendance was state mandatory, and is the first ever Asian WWF champion. Antonio Inoki is to Japanese wrestling what Miles Davis and John Coltrane are to jazz. Due to the fact that Antonio Inoki is closer to a god than a human, Antonio Inoki would very, very rarely lose in the squared circle. In fact, when this bout took place in 1987, Inoki had only lost 1 time that decade. In his first match, Vader beat him in only a handful of minutes. He dominated Inoki, took him around the ring in a tour of violence, and pinned him. Not only that, but as the crowd roared in the blasphemy of seeing wrestling's version of Jesus Christ get his ass beat, Vader pushed staff aside to continue kicking the shit out of Inoki. The crowd wasn't just unhappy to see this, they took over Sumo Hall and they rioted throughout the stadium. New Japan Pro Wrestling was temporarily banned from Sumo Hall due to the riots. Pro wrestling is the coolest shit around, it's not even fucking close. As a little bit of an added bonus, in Fatal Fury 2, Raiden turned babyface and adopted a new persona as Big Bear. While this is likely a reference to Vader's earlier names, Baby Bull and Bull Power, Big Bear's unmasked head shows more of a direct reference from how Vader's unmasked look was, especially with his goofy Road Warrior Hawk reverse mohawk. Initially appearing, but only kinda, in the underappreciated Capcom fighting game Cyberbots, Jin Saotome is likely better known for his inclusion in Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and 2. You know, seeing how it's actually him fighting instead of his mech Bloodia. Outside the cockpit, Jin's sharp, white outfit, action man stoicism, and flowing white scarf give off the air befitting of a protagonist. Which tracks, because he is very directly based on the protagonist of Apocalypse Zero, Kakugo Hagakure. Apocalypse Zero is a perfectly edgy, ultra-violent action manga from the mid-90s, and it fucking rules. Set in the aftermath of an apocalyptic earthquake, Kakugo is a straight-laced and somewhat militaristic fellow who fights against demonic monsters with the help of his fortified armor shell, Zero. Bearing a certain resemblance to Kamen Rider, Zero is no simple suit of armor. It is powered by the vengeful spirits of 3,000 soldiers who were sacrificed in its creation. They communicate with Kakugo and overall seem pretty buddy-buddy with him. This is by no means the only tool at Kakugo's disposal. He also has 8 metal balls embedded in his body that can either coat his skin in metal or be removed and used as weapons. Apocalypse Zero is well known for how over the top it is, and I'll be honest, it initially turned me off because I wasn't big into meathead battle shonen, but like, nah, this shit rules. The extremeness, most of which I won't mention for content reasons, is constantly entertaining. I'm not gonna say it's played for comedy or anything, but it lacks the grim, dark seriousness and instead comes off maybe a little closer to like a B-level slasher movie. Also, the female protagonist, Sumiko Hori, is a standout example among the genre. Like, I love this little angel, she's the fucking best. If you can stomach gore, but in a more Mortal Kombat 3 multiple rib cages exploding from one person kind of way, I would recommend the manga. It's weird, it's wild, it takes itself as seriously as required, but otherwise goes far beyond that, so you just have to like buckle up and enjoy the ride. But regardless of all the action and violence, Jin is instead based off of Kakugo's casual attire. When not turning grotesque demons inside out, Kakugo is a very straight-laced human who dresses in an all-white garb based on the Japanese naval uniform. When put side by side, you can easily see the resemblance of a stoic yet intensely hot-blooded good guy draped in white. The similarities kinda stop there, since Kakugo is a freakish Kamen Rider gore fiend and Jin is a slower, beefy punch boy, but Jin does take one move directly out of Kakugo's repertoire. In the fight with Warlord Kai, Kakugo is grabbed and is going to be blasted with a deadly instant freezing liquid. To avoid this, Kakugo explodes his fortified armor shell, blowing back Warlord Kai and allowing Kakugo to escape in the nude. Jin's Saotome dynamite attack is a direct reference to this, blasting off Jin's clothing as he's left wearing nothing but a fundoshi. Oh, now you bust out a sword? Should've done that sooner, Jin. Maybe you wouldn't be low tier in MVC 2. We're gonna finish off back in the SNK mines as we look at a game for the failed Neo Geo 64. SNK's foray into the 64-bit 3D games did not yield much. In fact, it only had 7 games for it. Of those games, SNK tried to do something very, very different with their fighter, Buriki 1. A game based on the then rising sport of mixed martial arts, Buriki 1 is a game featuring multiple schools of fighting and has a control scheme that is basically reversed compared to how we traditionally approach fighters. There are many among the cast molded in the clay of others, including Patrick Von Hating being any bald pro wrestler you want to graph onto him, and Ivan Sokolov being Alexander Karelin. If you ever see a Russian wrestler, it's always part Alexander Karelin. But there are 2 characters destined to be in this game, as there's no world where you are making an MMA game and not referencing 2 of the biggest stars in Japan. First off is Jacques Ducalis, a French judoka, maybe more on paper based around the French judoka David Doilet, but as a brown man in a gi, it is unmistakable who this actually is. Hoist Gracie. I don't know what the next best parallel to the Gracie family is. Like, imagine if there were an additional 24 LeBron Jameses and the James family invented the power forward position. The Gracies are Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Hoist is the most famous member thanks to winning the very first Ultimate Fighting Championship in 1993. However, as the 90s continued, an MMA organization in Japan would begin to eclipse the UFC, the beloved Pride FC. Pride, to many, is still the greatest MMA org to have ever lived, being a home to glorious violence and juiced up dudes who were ready to create said destruction. During their first couple years, one of the homegrown talents was quickly becoming the hottest act on any card, Kazushi Sakuraba. This is the mold for Buriki 1's other character of note and the protagonist of their game, Guy Tendo. Guy is a fiery competitor who fights with a custom all-arounder style, which was a very fresh take on MMA at the time. This matches Sakuraba's melding of striking and grappling, and the similarities don't stop there. Both have similar gear and build, as well as sharing a particularly iconic bright hairstyle. This orange hair ties all of our characters together, as it comes from the famous Sakuraba vs. Gracie match at the Tokyo Dome in 2000. Hoist, upset that Sakuraba had defeated fellow family member Hoyler Gracie, and honestly, Sakuraba kinda fucked on this dude, had challenged Sakuraba to a match with special rules. No referee stoppage, no judges, and an unlimited amount of 15-minute rounds until one man is knocked out, submits, or throws in the towel. When it came time for the fight, Hoist was flanked by the Gracie family, whereas Sakuraba was flanked by 2 other men, all 3 men masked up to conceal which one was Sakuraba. Before the fight began, Sakuraba unveiled himself and his new bright orange hair. In front of nearly 40,000 strong, the fight of the century was about to take place. Sakuraba and Hoist fought for a staggering hour and a half. Within the span of a feature-length film, both men engaged in striking, wrestling, and submission attempts. Over the course of 6 grueling rounds, Sakuraba had scored enough leg kicks to severely damage Hoist. When Hoist sat down at the stool to rest for round number 7, he realized that something was wrong. Unbeknownst to Hoist, Sakuraba had fractured one of Hoist's femurs with all of the leg kicks, and Hoist no longer had the power to get back up off the stool and continue the fight. With no other option, Hoist's brother Horion threw in the towel, and Sakuraba was declared the winner. Surrounded by his countrymen, Kazushi Sakuraba had done the impossible and defeated one of the biggest names in combat sports. Kazushi Sakuraba vs. Hoist Gracie is to MMA what Joe Frazier vs. Muhammad Ali is to boxing, or what Hulk Hogan vs. Andre the Giant is to pro wrestling. To call this match famous would almost be giving it short shrift. It is possibly the most influential match in this sport's lifespan, and the chance of anything ever rivaling it is minimal. It marked a sea change for the dominance of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to the emergence of well-rounded striking and shoot wrestling styles. In a sense, it is a no-brainer to have Gai Tendo be designed after Kazushi Sakuraba, as Gai is the protagonist of Buriki 1, and after defeating Hoist, Sakuraba was the protagonist of Japanese MMA. There's just one problem. Kazushi Sakuraba and Hoist Gracie happened in May 2000. Buriki 1 released in May of 1999. Sakuraba, while enjoying the color orange on his gear from time to time, had not done his famous orange hair dye job by the time Buriki 1 was in development. In fact, he did it quite a bit afterwards. It's all too easy to look at both people side by side and see the blinding similarities, but in actuality, the timelines do not match up. What's going on here? How did these two come to mirror each other so much when the fictitious character from the mostly failed arcade game comes first? I've had most of the script written for a while, but when I realized the dates not lining up, I sat down to figure out what was going on. If you want to read my full feature on how Gai Tendo and Kazushi Sakuraba came to be linked, check out my feature, The Mystery of Gai Tendo, on supercombo.gg. But in short, I'll summarize my findings here. Gai Tendo was indeed based on Kazushi Sakuraba, but not in the way that it would eventually seem. While attempts to contact multiple MMA journalists petered out, I was able to ask the artist for Buriki 1 directly. SNK artist Hiroaki was gracious enough to answer my questions regarding Gai's design, and friend of the channel Sleep Mode stepped in to be the translator. While Hiroaki confirms that Sakuraba is an influence on Gai, he isn't the only one, as Baki Hanma from the famed batshit crazy muscle freak piss tetrahedron manga Baki the Grappler was someone Hiroaki also drew from. This makes sense, as Baki's combat style is a similar, but significantly less realistic, combination of styles to create a well-rounded fighting approach. But the key Hiroaki talked about was that he gave Gai red hair, as he thought it would be the color of a champion. Wait, red? Well, depending on the depiction of Gai, sometimes his hair is more red and sometimes it is more orange. You can even see on the character select screen of Buriki 1 that Polygon Gai has bright red hair and Portrait Gai has bright orange hair. This isn't a one-time goof, as multiple pieces of art show Gai either way. Even as recently as a couple years ago, Hiroaki has drawn Gai with unmistakably orange hair. So the truth is, Yes, Guy Tendo is a reference to Kazushi Sakuraba, but not in the way people think. When you look at Sakuraba and Guy and compare their vibrant hair color, what you're looking at is just a coincidence. A fucking crazy ass coincidence. References are not bad. JoJo's did it too. Hirohiko Araki's unique art style is heavily influenced by Puerto Rican fashion illustrator Antonio Lopez, down to the point that some of Lopez's illustrations feel like JoJo characters who were left off the cutting room floor. You're telling me this dude wasn't a minor player from Battle Tendency? Your creative flow doesn't just sprout up from nothing. No seed grows from the ground without watering. There is nothing wrong with looking at the works or likenesses of others and taking influence from them. I do it too! The art style for my chapter cards draws heavily from old Metal Heart design books, current age Y2K artists, and album artwork I enjoy. My video format is based on something I saw in how Thor High Heels does his editing. We don't create from nothing. Don't be afraid to take the things you love and play with them like molding clay. Everyone does it! Baki the Grappler features multiple characters that are hardly even referential. There's no attempt to hide that Mount Toba is Giant Baba, Kanji Igari is Antonio Inoki, and Alexander Gallon is Alexander Carolyn. Don't be so blind to the pursuit of originality that you forsake drawing directly from the things you love. I know this sounds weirdly preachy, but look at what we've been talking about. Each of these characters have taken on their own life and popularity separate from the very direct original concepts. Does knowing that King is based on Tiger Mask truly weaken King? Nah, King still fucking rules. If anything, it's better to know that some iconic characters were made in the mold of something else. Because if it works for popular fighting games that have endured long enough to become institutions, then it can work for anyone with the desire to create. Don't limit yourself. Make something with what you love, because that love will no doubt come through in the final product, regardless of if the reference is understood or not.
Time to play the game. Time to play the game.